So I'm going to welcome everybody to the Center for Artistry and Scholarship's first webinar. I hope that you can hear me. My name is Jill Davidson. I'm the program director for the Center for Artistry and Scholarship. And as you can see, we have a fabulous panel to talk about how schools can stay innovative through time. We have lots to talk about. And we're going to start with a quick introduction. I'm going to show some slides, and then we're going to get on with our discussion. So in the meantime, while I get these queued up, maybe the four of you can just introduce yourselves, your names and what you do, and then we'll get on with the business.
Sure. Well, I am Mirko Chardon, and I am the founding head of school of the Putnam Ave Upper School in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is a 7-year-old, 6 to 8, innovative middle school in Cambridge.
I'm Sonny Pye. I'm an administrator at Charleston High School, and I direct the Diploma Plus program there, an alternative program with campuses in Charleston and Dorchester.
Hello, I'm Carmen Torres, and I am the co-founder of the Perone Sizer Institute for Creative Education and Leadership within the Nathan, and I'm a veteran Boston Public School educator.
And I'm Linda Nathan, and I work with Carmen and the Perone Sizer Institute for Creative Leadership. I'm the executive director of the Center for Artistry and Scholarship, and I spent about 4 decades in the Boston Public Schools.
So as you can see, we're running this as an interactive panel conversation. I have a couple slides, but real light on slides and heavy on insighted conversation. You do have a Q&A function as part of this webinar, so fire away with your questions. We'll grab them as we go and add them to the conversation. I'm just going to show a few slides about a couple of our upcoming webinars. We invite you to our events page to see more about these webinars. You can register there and see our other upcoming events as well. We also want to remind folks that we have a conference coming up in October called Next Wave. We're very excited. Some of the innovations that we're going to be talking about today, we're going to be featuring there. You can find out more on our website as well. And finally, we invite you to explore the Perone Sizer Institute for Creative Leadership. We're accepting applications for next year's cohort right now. There's much more online about it. Pretty sure we're going to refer to it during this conversation. So wanted to let people know at the outset that we would love to hear from you about it. So now on with the show. I'd like to have Mirko start and talk a bit about your school. I'll show a few slides about the school, but really wanted to get a little bit of insight from everybody sort of about their work and go a little more deep.
Sure. Well, the Putnam Ave Upper School is a 7-year-old school in Cambridge. We're founded on the vision or the belief that all of our students are on trajectories towards the good life. That specifically referring to the best possible quality of life in adulthood. We leave that semi-ambiguous because we believe it's not our goal to define for kids what the good life is. It's our job to provide for them tools to help pursue their good life and to expose them to all the possibilities. We also revolve around 5 core values or core beliefs, being passion, pride, ownership, balance, and perseverance. Specifically that we want young people to develop a passion for social justice in the pursuit of academic excellence, emphasis on pursuit, that we want them to have pride in their identities and the positive impact that we want them to believe they will have on members of the community, that we want them to understand what ownership is, being able to take responsibility for your decision making. We want them to be balanced, that it's not just about academics. We're serving the whole child. We need to explore athletics, arts, and all types of extracurricular opportunities. And we want them to know what it means to wrestle with perseverance, not just facing challenges, but being able to, in a reflective manner, say, hey, I overcome something, and I know what the steps were that I have to take to overcome.
And before we move on, can you just say a word about innovation at Putnam Avenue Upper?
Sure. I think innovation is at the core of what we do. So much so, I don't even think we utilize that word. I think we think about what makes sense for our students and the adults in our community who are working with students right now. If there is a need that presents itself, how do we think creatively to be able to resolve that problem and ensure that the human beings who are a member of our community are seen, are heard, and have a positive experience and feel like they can be themselves.
Great, thanks. So Sunny, sing goes. Here you are.
So I'm an administrator at Charlestown High School, and I'll talk about Charlestown first. Charlestown's an open enrollment high school in Boston. We've got about 900 students. And the way we like to think about our school is that we try to make sure that our school is ready to serve any student that walks through our doors. So that if you are a student who just enrolled and just arrived to this country and doesn't speak any English, if you are a student with pretty special IEP and special education plan, where you're going to be in school until you're 22 and then transition to adult services. All different ranges of students we try to make sure that our school can serve. And then the Diploma Plus program is one of the programs we have there, designed to serve students who have not yet been successful in high school, typically maybe 2 years old for their grade. And in that program, we specifically try to center around 3 values, and those are critical consciousness, self-awareness, and Ubuntu. So critical consciousness, really making sure students are able to look at the world critically, ask key questions that are going to help them be leaders that are making society a better place when they're adults. And self-awareness, that they're reflecting on themselves and who they need to be if they're going to be creators of that change. And then Ubuntu, that they're really thinking about their community and how nobody does anything themselves and they need to work in partnership with others. So that's one of the programs at Charlestown. And at Charlestown, you can see our vision and core values there. And really that being critical thinkers and bold leaders applies to both our students and to the adults that work at the school, to try to challenge ourselves to be bold leaders and finding solutions that are really going to work for all of our community. And you can see our mission statement there. One of the key points there is our second bullet, the small learning community model. In a school of about 900 students, we strive to have communities of about 150 learners at most that are working together to both know students really, really well, and also to allow the adults that are working there to partner together and get to know each other well enough that they can operate as a really well-oiled machine.
Thank you very much. Excuse me, everybody. And same response about innovation. I mean, it's in your title, so if you could think a little bit about, excuse my voice, everybody, if you could think a little bit about innovation at your school.
Sure.
I'd love to hear about it.
I think that if we already knew how to solve some of the issues that are facing schools today, we would not need to innovate. And so, kind of like Marco said, every day feels like there's challenges to think about differently. I think the typical thing to do in education is ideas sort of recycle, and if you've been around long enough, then you see certain things come around again. And I think one of the challenges is to continue to think creatively and think about ways we can solve problems or things we can try that haven't been tried before. Because I think how I've been in Boston Public Schools now 20 years, I think what it looks like now compared to what it looked like even 5 years ago is very, very different. And so thinking a lot about what kinds of solutions can solve today's problems is an everyday thing.
Cool. Thanks. So Carmen, over to you.
Okay, well,
And you said a bit about what you did, but maybe you could go a little deeper, particularly in terms of thinking about sort of the role of innovation and what your sense of innovation is and the work that you do.
I think for me, innovation is the ability to adapt and evolve, to meet the changing needs of students particularly, and also how you prepare adults to meet those needs. Because at the end of the day, whatever we do has to be driven by what is best for our students. And when our population of students changes or it's innovative, most likely we'll have to change in terms of what approaches we need to take and what systems and practices we have to put into place to meet the needs of those changing population. So when I think about innovation, it's also being able to think about what's the technical stuff that I can handle and what's the adaptive, because the adaptive challenges when you have to change people's hearts and minds, and those are really hard. And how you prioritize that, not just as a leader, but with your team.
Right. And Linda, I got a little note from the audience that we can't quite see you.
Oh, I'll sit on Carmen's lap.
Yeah, okay, that's good, we can see you now. So same goes for you.
Well, I think I build on a little bit of what Carmen just said. Carmen and I talk a lot about brain science. Carmen's the scientist of the team of us. But the reason I think we use the word innovate today is because we know so much more about the brain than we did even 5 years ago, 3 years ago. You know, and I think about an innovation that Mirko experienced when he was a student with us, with Carmen and me at Fenway. You know, advisory was something that people had just begun to hear about in the late 70s, early 80s. And when we implemented advisory in Fenway, that was heretical. Like people were like, what? How can you do that? No, kids don't need to be in relationships with adults outside of the content classroom. So I think this word innovate speaks to now what we understand about what kids need, what adults need, and how our schools must change.
Thank you. I think we're gonna sort of take those, you know, individual definitions and go more deeply into them. For those of you who are joining us, I do want to note, we're recording this webinar. We will make it available soon after, along with any resources that come up that are mentioned today. So if you're following along and taking notes, that's awesome. But we'll also capture and share it for everybody. We'll email you when that goes live. So as we transition to conversations, we have a couple of questions to debate and dig into, and we really invite all of you to share your own questions. I see that a couple of people already have through the Q&A function. That's awesome. And I'll circulate them into the conversation as we go. So the first questions, I think, for Carmen and Linda, opposed to Mirko and Sunny.
Okay. When schools are working for kids, what does that look like? How do you know that things are working? What makes a good life in your school? What makes good leadership in yours?
So I think it's a three-part recipe. I think first and foremost that students feel seen and heard. I think part of how they feel seen and heard is if they see themselves reflected, you know, in the staff, you know, faculty. Do folks look like them? Do they have folks who come from backgrounds that are similar to theirs? Is there content in the classrooms that revolves around things that they find relevant? And are the adults listening to them? Are there structures in place? So it's not just by chance, but structures that capture student voice. I think when students feel seen and heard, schools become safe spaces and students have fun. And I think that's the evidence that it's
We
working.
forget about the fun.
Yeah.
Actually, it's like so serious today. Yeah.
Rigor mortis.
I think authentic engagement's fun. You know, if there's something that you're passionate about, you put your all into it.
Right.
And you don't budget what you're doing. If you're really, really passionate about it, you go all the way. I had students participate in a math game tournament on Friday called Flagway, and it was amazing to see you know, students of various backgrounds, various ability levels, cheering each other on, just really passionate about doing math at a high level. So I think the fun part is it's instrumental. It's so important.
I thought about three things. The three things I thought of were agency and leadership and surprising growth.
And surprising growth.
Right? So, I mean, I think there's a lot of basic functions of school, and I think one of the things that's challenging today is making sure student basic foundational needs are met. And I know we have a lot of students at Charleston who outside of school, their life looks, can look pretty unstable. And so I think that's one core that you have to have that in place, and that's not a small task. But I think the big goals, way beyond that, and way beyond what we typically think about school. Agency, that if young people have this experience in school, that they are in control of something. So I think teenagers are not in control of very much, and are in this weird spot between adulthood and being a child. And so I think any experience, whether it's a small project, whether it's student government, whether it's we've had students who protested budget cuts, who felt a lot of agency out of that effort. Anywhere where they can start to experience what that's like to drive your own life is important. And then leadership goes along with that, but this feeling of what kinds of skills do you need to build to be a leader? I think to be in a conversation with students around, well, it's important to be on time, or is a very different conversation if you're talking about, well, if you're going to be in charge of this effort, you need to be at the head of the pack, and you need to be on time and prepared and one step ahead of folks so that you can be there leading the charge. That's a very different conversation than just, it's the right thing to do to be on time and do your homework or whatever. And then surprising growth, I think that's the part for me, that's the fun, but when you get surprised or shocked by some way that you grew, you are more likely to then continue that. And I think all of those three things feed into a young person wanting to learn more in the future, which I think is the best thing that we can do. Because we won't ever have enough time to teach everything or learn everything in this 4 years, whatever it is. If people leave that experience loving learning and wanting to do more, then we've done a good job.
Thank you.
That's great, you guys. So I had a chance to see both of you when you were teachers, and now you're both leaders in buildings and programs. And I'd love you both to talk a little bit about when school's working well for teachers, what does it look like? And maybe it's very connected to what you said about the kids, but maybe there's some nuance there that's a little different. So I remember both of you.
Well, for me, I would say it's very much know what it's like for kids. Teachers need to feel seen and heard. I think oftentimes, and particularly in the schools, the world of schools or education now, where high stakes testing rules the roost, teachers are often told to just implement curriculum blindly, don't develop relationships with students, and you need to be a prototype of something that's never existed. I think when we treat teachers like human beings and celebrate their fragility, their humanity, their imperfection, and provide them with authentic learning opportunities, they're able to create that for students. And I think that's where the magic happens. When we give them freedom to reclaim their humanity. They're human beings who are imparting knowledge and wisdom to the next generation. They're not robots that are filtering out Jeopardy knowledge.
Thanks.
I would agree with that. I thought of the same things, right? The agency and leadership and the surprising growth for teachers. That agency piece is really important. Because I feel like in the course of my career, I've seen more and more almost this assumption that teachers will not know what they're doing, so we have to prescribe more and more to ensure a good outcome, whatever that might be. And that's just a recipe for disaster. The more you create that prescription, the more you're going to attract teaching candidates who want to live in that prescribed system. And so, as a teacher with both of you, I felt a lot of agency. I felt I could make my own decisions. I felt like if there was something even beyond my classroom, if there was some aspect of the school that I thought could be better, I had an open road to create that. And I also think the places where either I grew surprisingly or I saw results that were surprising to me, right? Whether those results in my class, results in the school, even results my colleague caused, gave a lot of energy. Teaching can be really tiring. It's really tiring sometimes to be in a slog or a grind, but when you see those moments where some student does something that you really were not thinking would ever happen, it fuels you for the next years. It could be years.
That's great. Thanks, you guys. That's great.
So for people who have joined us, I want to let you in on a little behind the scenes. You may have heard some background noise. We apologize for that. We're based at a school, So probably for most of you, that background noise of kids moving toward buses sounds familiar, but I apologize if it was at all distracting. The kids are for the most part on their way, so we're gonna continue on our way. So we actually got some great questions from folks who are attending, and I just wanted to share one of those from Joanna McPherson. Thank you, Joanna. She said, how do you best involve parents and community that in ways that achieve inclusion and speak to the current social issues we face, racism, deportation, ESL, poverty? What does a new school need to consider along these lines?
I think Marco spoke about, we're answering this question now, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, just throwing it out.
So, Marco started today by talking about making sure that the staff is a good fit for the students see themselves reflected there. And I think it's the same with parents. And I think we have certain staff members in our school who understand exactly what parents are going through because they still are in that same situation. I hired one of our parents at one point, and she continues to be someone who is so closely tapped into what's going on with parents. And I think that's important. I think it's important that parents can see themselves reflected in the school. We don't always think about that in the same way that we think about it with students. But I think that's one key part, because those staff members will think of totally different ways of engaging with parents and totally different questions and topics of things that parents might be interested in than other staff members will.
I would add that parents and family members, caregivers, need to feel seen and heard. Because it's all about trust. They're trusting us with their most precious gift. And they want to believe that we are doing the right thing and we have our best interest in mind for their children. I think we also need to think creatively about what types of supports can our schools provide, to our families and the communities in which we're in. Not just in service of saying, hey, families, we're doing this so you can help us with our jobs, but just because it's the right thing to do. Specifically with the cultural proficient aspects of the question, I can think of an example of something we do at PAWS, which is a series called Community Conversations on Identity and Diversity. We bring in some facilitators, so it's not school personnel who are running it. We make it available, to family caregivers, but anybody in the community who's willing to come. We provide hot food. I put emphasis on hot food because folks feel seen and heard based on the types of food that you have, in the space. So we do hot food by local businesses. We provide childcare, essentially no barriers. If you want to come and engage in the conversation, we'll make sure that you can be fully present in the room. Then how do we model how adults can have conversations about race, about immigration, about politics, about class, about gender identity? In service of how they have those conversations and support the young people in their lives, but also about their curiosity. If their capacity is expanded, they're able to do more, for their kiddos. And if they know that we care enough to say, hey, this is for you, just because it's good and not because we're expecting to get something from you. It takes us in the direction of establishing trust.
And did you start those year one? Because the questioner also was asking, to start a new school. Did you do that in your first year at the school, or did that come in year 2 or year 3?
That came in I believe it was year 3 of the school. We essentially at the forefront figured out how do we make sense of what it means to be a school community.
Yeah.
How do we
First, you needed to do that.
Right. And then how do we expand that circle and think about who are members of our community who deeply impact what happens in the building, but they're not present in the building. But their presence is still felt and needs to be acknowledged.
One of the things we did at VA, I don't know if you remember this, I'm sure you remember this, is early days, we brought in all of our parents to answer the same question. We were asking teachers and the kids, what should a graduate of the Boston Arts Academy know and be able to do? Because it was a new school, so we needed parents to also engage with us curricularly, and they had never been asked to do that kind of work.
And I think what that opportunity is, the good life is different from maybe what you think. What the good life is for my family, and the good life is for the next family. So it gave us an opportunity to express what is success would look like for your student. That it informs us, because otherwise we're making assumptions based on what we think is the good thing, the good life. So getting them involved beyond, beyond bake sale, but really having an authentic opportunity for them to have fun. That's important, to have some part that's social, but also to have conversations that are about the future of their children.
Absolutely.
I think both of you said something I just wanted to underscore is this work that educators do with kids. And I don't know if it was Vito himself who said this, but somebody said it, maybe it was Peter McCaffrey. It's the most intimate work we do, right? And so parents have to be engaged with that because it's so intimate, this thing we're doing with their children.
Right.
And the question was also about the social and emotional learning. If you don't build the psychological trust with parents and families, then you can't go anywhere with accountability or anything else. So I think providing opportunities to build that psychological trust so that they know, it's not just my job. I believe this is really important.
Right.
I feel like I learned that as an advisor at USC.
Yeah.
Because I feel like at BAA as an advisor, it was very clear when we would meet with our advisees' families, and we did a reading. I remember when we did a Sarah Lawrence Life of Reading, and we talked about how to establish that trust and thinking about all the different places a teacher may be coming to that meeting with and all the different places a parent may be coming to. And I remember I used to say sometimes in our advisory meetings, we used to say, well, we know you've done a really great job with the students so far. Sometimes you're talking about where they're not doing well academically. And I used to see parents visibly relax, and the conversation would shift to a place where we're together trying to partner. I think in high schools especially, you can reach a point where parents have become more disengaged if students are older. And I think when a parent feels like you're trying to accomplish the same goals that they're trying to accomplish and you're now working together, I think about having parents come to parent council meetings or serve on school committees, things like that. Once there's been a victory with their child, they will come for anything. They'll come for anything. Whereas there's always complaints that parents are too busy or things like that. I think it's when that primary goal of making sure that student, whatever the parents' goals are forwarded, then there's like this magic energy that can
And one of the most important conversations that I remember about a parent of a child with special needs in the meeting is, this is a student in high school. This is the first time that anybody's told me what my kid can do. Usually it's, they can't do this, they can't do this. And I think to really think about asset-based conversations, not that we're going to negate the needs of the student, but the kids come with good stuff.
Absolutely.
That's great.
So there's actually a related question from Berta Berties.
Hi, Berta.
Hi, Berta. Which is, in terms of affirming foundational values, what are ways that the teaching and learning community engage in this affirmation? And what are some rituals that your schools value?
Sure. So I would say for us, authentic fragility, and we do that through personal narrative. We utilize Marshall Gantz's framework of the story of self, us, and now. And we particularly focus on the story itself as a component of our advisory program.
And I'll share some of that story of shelf materials and what we share after this.
Awesome. So the long and short is that every member of our school community, staff member and students, develops a public story of self, which revolves around 3 elements: choice, challenge, and outcome. This year in particular, we had our first public story of self day, which essentially meant that we invited members of the community and folks all around the Commonwealth to come in and listen to our students. And it was phenomenal to see the bonding, the informal mentorship between adults and children, children making connections with each other, the courage and stories that were shared that ranged from things as deep as, dealing with a loved one who is wrestling with cancer, to things, talking about the loss of a parent, challenges at school, being able to allow our students and the adults in our community to share what their narratives are and to be the author of those stories. I think was powerful in being able to ritualize that everybody has a story. Everyone's story might be different, but as humans, we all have this connection in that we face challenges daily. We make choices, in the face of those challenges, and we have to reflect on the outcomes. I think that's how we've wrestled with that.
That's great.
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, absolutely. How are, sorry, two questions for both to make sure I'm reading the right one. So in terms of affirming foundational values, what are ways that the teaching and learning community engage in this affirmation? And what are some rituals that affirm your school's values?
So in Diploma Plus, we start and end every day with Harambe. So Harambe is we actually consciously tried to plan rituals because we were talking about how they can anchor students' experience. So we didn't start with this in our probably third or fourth year, I think, is when we started it. But everybody stands in a circle in our common space to open the day. Students share their name and an AKA that they like to be called. And then we usually have a wisdom of the day. And our students are probably over the years 99% Black and Latino. And we usually start with the daily wisdom, and it's a quote from a person of the African diaspora. And we tell the students very consciously that this is not because we're trying to negate certain voices or anything like that, but just that most of the quotes that they've seen in their life have not been from people of the African diaspora. So we're trying to elevate their voices. And then the students actually go through and discuss the quote in Harambe. And that's our critical consciousness. The Harambe is our Ubuntu. We actually ask the students to connect the quote to one of those values at the same time. So we have that sort of built into our day. And at the end of the day, we close in the same ritual of Harambe, and rather than discuss the daily wisdom, we do shout outs and usually have select a student from our community lead that Harambe. So that's one way we try to sort of start and end the day in that ritual and keep a way that we remind ourselves of our values every day.
Well, at the Arts Academy, one of the things that we did every year with the freshmen was to have them create an identity box. Because we had all the stuff you get on school records about kids. We wanted them to present themselves and to bring what they wanted us to know about them and their family, what they love, they hate. And then they got to share this in a public forum for each other and in the classroom as well. So I think that's really important to get early on a lot of information about all of your new kids particularly. I think the other thing that we did really well was that we have, on-roll assemblies, but we felt that there's so many kids that get left out when it's just about grades. So we created opportunities for kids to shine in other ways and get the shared values, awards, or some other things like that. So it wasn't just about grades, but we try to get a more holistic appreciation of the whole student.
And you actually started that. That was your thing. Remember that? You call out. But the only other thing I was going to sort of add to this in terms of foundational values, and you guys have all been talking about this, is it's so important to ask the kids, right? Like, what do you value? What is it? We were talking about the Harambe Circle. Schools that seem to get this right are schools that begin and end with the kids, right? The day begins with the kids talking to one another, and the day ends with kids talking to one another. And we learned at the Arts Academy, it took a long time to get here, that if we could not have kids working in silos by grade, but by major over 4 grades in groups, that we would do much better. Because then seniors could talk to freshmen, and there was that whole arc of learning. And I think we forget that this age-based school thing is not particularly innovative. That the more we can do mixing it up, the better kids will be. I really feel that.
The advisory was designed for that, of course. And then you have this one adult that you have
for 4 years.
For 4 years. So the families don't have to learn, new people every year. They have a person they can go to for good or bad, or questions, etc. And feels they have somebody that's there for them.
You know, one thing about the rituals and the values, I do think there's an aspect of it that can be kind of corny.
Yeah, really.
Like, you know, the graphics,
Yeah.
the little mottos, the little
Yeah,
things like that. And I think it can't be only that.
Yeah.
Of course, there has to be a
Yeah,
lot of substance.
yeah.
But I think that's sometimes things that get overlooked, especially between like highly intellectual professional communities.
Mhm.
You forget about that.
The corny stuff.
Yeah, and I just, you know,
It doesn't just have to be corny though.
Yeah.
It can also be cool. I say
Yeah.
that because I'm
catchy. Maybe catchy is a better
Well,
word.
I'm passionate about being able to bring in the entrepreneurial lens.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
you know, we think about values,
Yeah.
you know, how do we present them to kids? Not the way educators are told they have to, but
Yeah,
the way things
yeah.
happen in real
Yeah,
life.
yeah, cool.
So Putnam Ave, we have a lot of swag, but we have that because kids think it's cool.
Uh-huh.
And we have them design the logo, and there's certain ritual things that we do that kids think are cool.
Yeah.
They love singing the core value song, which they've written, you know, as
They
a rap.
wrote it though,
Yeah,
right?
they love when we start assemblies, they don't just start in their own way. It's always, when I say Putnam, you say Ave.
Yeah.
There are other things that really kind of build off
Yeah.
of that youth culture.
Yeah.
But I think we've only been able to give ourselves permission to include those because we've had to take off our educator lenses
Right.
and say, hey,
Right.
if I'm thinking like an artist, if I am thinking like a fashion designer,
Right.
how do I make this cool
Yeah.
for the kids?
That's
And if it's
that's
cool
so
for
great.
them, how do they buy in, you know, in a different type of way?
I love that. I really do.
So we had another really great question. It was directed to Sunny, but I think that it's sort of for all of us, which is in your 20 or more years in education, what are the ideas that you've seen recycled over and over again?
Great question.
And what are the areas that you have not seen enough innovative thinking? And that's from Ria Faye Berquist. So cool question.
Great, great.
I mean, I think about, no, I'm on the spot.
Yeah.
I think about, you know, well, everything needs to be about group work and everything needs to be about projects. And then, you know, it'll sort of swing back to, well, no, we should make things more individual and we should make things very sort of standardized. And I think things like that sort of swing back and forth. The trend that I heard about that was different, and now it's becoming more of a trend, but it at least felt like a new idea, was looking at competency-based grades and how students are assessed based on competency, which is something we do both at Diploma Plus and now working a lot on at Charlestown. And that idea, so much of teacher training and stuff revolves, we're unpacking because it revolves around stuff that's not that. So like in competency-based grades, the way we think about it is that students are assessed based on specific competencies and that you try to separate some of those things out so that they're not tied together. And for example, if a student is learning how to write a 10-page research paper, that's a particular competency. And oftentimes what's typical in schools is that if the student turns in that paper late, they get marked down X number of points. And if they turn it in 3 days late, they get marked down even more points, regardless of the quality of the paper. And I think competency-based grading says to separate those things, that you would, if a student turned in a paper 2 weeks late, but it was a 10-page paper at A level, you would say that they mastered that skill of writing the 10-page paper, but they have not yet mastered the skill of meeting a deadline. And that growth can happen differently. And so students can progress in different ways, and that we're really looking at the things we care about and assessing them. But as we start to unpack that, teachers are running into things like classroom management, for example, daily points and awarding students points for participation, things like that. That's not quite the same thing as building towards competency. It's really more of a management tool. And it's really challenged us to think about how are we going to manage students, or how are we going to think about classroom management in a different way and not rely on this extrinsically motivated point value, and really get students to care more about why are they there and what are they there to learn, and why should they care about what they're learning, regardless of that. So that's something that I see is more innovative and different and not like anything I quite heard before.
Can I just interject there? Because I would say the other side of that is there has not been enough work done on competency-based grading. So, you know, the research literature is very slim, very, very thin. we don't understand that. So to the caller's question, that's an area that we need a ton more work done. Because that's why schools struggle so hard, because there's not, you know, it became very, I would say, it went from competency to sort of mastery objectives. And that's not the correct art, right? But that's where we went.
Yeah.
And we need to really understand. I loved your example of the 10-page paper. So what is the skill that we're teaching there? How do we measure that? And the skill, you know, Mirko talked about that when he was talking about values, the skill of how do you persevere through something hard may not, and getting it in on time, may not be the same as actually writing the paper.
The other struggle about things that come and go is what are the skills that kids need versus what is the content? We go back to you need canon, no, but then that's not culturally representative of most of our students, and I think that's a conversation we keep coming back to
That's a cycle
all
one.
the time. You know, and okay, now we have the 21st century skills, so do we throw away the old ones? You know, what is it? I think those are things that we're always struggling with as educators. I keep thinking about the school to career, and that was so big, and thinking and doing and making is back. You know, so I think we have to be look. Why do we stop doing things? Is it funding? I think a lot of it is that. No more games money. You know, but what was it about those practices that kids have really learned from and really grown from, you know?
An innovation, I love the way you're talking about it, because I think an innovation that both of you, and I want you to talk at some point in this webinar about what are the obstacles to get to this place. I think we know that engagement, you both use the word in different ways, engagement and agency are critical for learning. I remember way back in the day when Vito Perrone said, why don't we have project year and school week? I still think that's the best question I've ever been asked, because we still think of school in this grade, you know, age-based, you do this in 3rd grade, you do this in 4th grade, you know, our textbooks are structured that way. And I don't think that's connected necessarily to learning. So if we could think about learning, just learning, would we design school? I don't know.
I think it's also the context that we're in.
Yeah.
So I think one of the big, there's this book called Make Me by Eric DeShalis, right? And we read it as a staff. And there's a part that was very controversial in our staff around honor roll assemblies. And how honor roll assemblies are not really conducive to learning. And they usually don't boost the students being honored that much. And the students who are not being honored really hate it. And we were exploring that as a staff and talking about how many of those structures are Western-based and capitalist-based. And it's a very sort of competitive capitalist mentality. And so much of school is like that. You know, what's your class rank and all this kind of stuff. And if we look at the cultures that many of our students are coming from, right? And if you look at Asian culture, if you look at African culture, if you look at indigenous cultures, it's not competitive. It's communal. And it's I succeed because we all succeed, and if somebody's not making it, you all sort of wrap your arms around, and you literally circle around them and then you figure it out. And so to think about project week or something like that is so much, or project year, is so much more about that, right? And it's not about worrying about this person's learning the same thing as this person and all this kind of thing, but if we all learn as a group. But it's gotten harder and harder to separate from the external context. And I think that's so important to think about how to carve out those bubbles.
If I can add to it, and this is something that I'm extremely passionate about, it's the idea of putting emphasis on, you know, value-based, you know, schools and the adaptive hard work, and not the technical side. I think that there's been huge work around dehumanizing, you know, folks who work in schools, schools as an institution, and children and family that comes to schools. Because this idea has been, you know, if you can do this in this way by this age, then you'll be all right in life. Truth though is, and you really touch on this, and you know, when grit is not enough, is, you know, the fact that based on social economic status, politics, all types of things, you can master Common Core, you can master what the standards are and still not have a shot at college, at good jobs, or at life in general. So if we're truly thinking about education in a way that's bigger than it just being something that we do, I think we have to make different decisions. And we have to think about the impact of the decisions we make and have the courage to say that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what is different, I would say, today with innovation, although maybe we would say, no, it was just as bad back in the day. But it's so transactional right now. If you get this score on your test, then our school will be ranked this way. I might believe it's much better to have much more arts in a school, much more music, much more dance, much more theater, because that's going to help kids get further faster, but may not do the test score thing. We're really struggling with that. We really, really are.
The first time I heard that phrase, theory of action, I felt so uncomfortable, right? It was really in the context of us being asked as principals by district leadership what the theory of action was for our school. And it was exactly that. That was the template. If we do this, then this will happen, and the this will happen had to be something connected to student outcomes. And I just remember there, because I was trained by both of you, I was like, well, but it's not. It's so much more messy than that. And the transactional is a good word. That's
Although
exactly
we teach in GSI, it's a pretty revolutionary theory of action. So I think Carmen in particular has taken that phrase and said, come on, you can use that phrase to rock the boat.
Think about change, right?
So Linda, you had referred a bit about obstacles, and I think that we dug in a little bit. I'd like to push on that a little more.
Yeah, I mean, Sunny's beginning to talk about it by saying, we're asked to do these very linear kinds of things that don't necessarily speak to our nature, our way of communally coming together. But I would like you both to talk a little bit about a time where, you wanted to do this innovation and then the obstacle was there and you couldn't. I don't know if you can both think of something like that. I could offer some. I'll give you a minute.
Sure. I mean, the immediate thing that comes to mind for me is, MCAS or high stakes tests, in the overemphasis that will be placed on what test scores mean. And unfortunately, the assumption that a high test score is equated with success or a chance of the future, and folks not really unpacking that. And for me, I think it's always put me in a difficult place as an educator when I was in the classroom and also as a school leader, because that didn't work for me. When I was a student, when I went to schools that were very reliant on that compliance-based, show us this at this time, school didn't work for me. I was expelled from 3 schools, and I was sure that school didn't work for people who looked like me. I was planning on dropping out when I could age out. When I entered into a school, carrying about 2 of you, that really revolved around, digging into helping me understand how I can make a difference, how I had a voice, how I can, impact my surroundings, my community. School changed. There was relevance that was there. I got that this was not something that was being done to me, but it was something that was being done for me, with me, and I was empowered. And as a school leader, I feel like that's been my journey. How do I create that experience for kids? And how do I have the moral courage to say, hey, I will speak up for kids like me. I will speak up for the families of students like me, because they don't have this. They don't have the polished ed lingo. They don't have the degrees or other things, but they're still worthy of a shot at life, and they're still worthy of having their voices heard. So for me, I think there's always that tension. If your scores don't look a certain way, what does that mean about the teaching and learning that's happened? And have folks made conscious decisions to say, hey, we need to help a kid who suffered trauma. We need to help a family regain stability that hasn't had that stability, or do we not have the courage to stand in our humanity and ignore them and say, no, be quiet. We just need you to study and get these scores, and if you don't get it done, you're not good. Because that's the message.
And I think we're limiting those who will go into our wonderful profession because of this. I think we all can think of amazing alums that we'd want to see be teachers. They may not pass that intel. And, other people may sit here and say, but it's just that easy test. They should be able to do that. But I think your story, I really appreciate it, Marco, because I think when school is not first relational, and that's exactly what Carmen said. And today, you know, Carmen and I talk all the time about all of the trips we took with kids for years, you know, and the way Fenway began every year was we went and had, you know, food together, you know, that's the way the year began, was kids coming together, having fun together, eating together with their teachers. Then you could think about class, but you know, we don't do that as much anymore.
Well, the irony is that there's data that supports that
I
people
know.
don't look at. No,
Yeah.
John Hattie did his visible
Yeah,
learning study over 1 million individuals.
That's good.
And the two top things that impact student achievement more than anything are
Yeah.
first and foremost, the adults' belief that
Yeah.
the kids can do it. And secondly, the adults' belief that they have the skill sets to bring kids to success. Those are the top two things that lead to change. We have data,
Yeah.
huge data set, over 1 million, but we don't refer to that.
So we should make sure that our listeners know about John Hattie's work, because I think that's a good citation for us to think about. I like that.
Towards competency-based learning too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think that one of the obstacles that has to do with relational is, I mean, I do think it's time for those conversations.
Mhm.
And I think in the same way,
Time in the day, time in the year,
time whenever,
time, okay.
for the adults in the school to really build trust with each other, form close enough relationships that they're having authentic conversations, and then to actually do the work of trying to get on the same page
Yeah.
and act together
Yeah.
in terms of creating a certain learning environment.
Yeah.
I've been in schools where we've had lots of time
Mhm.
and schools where we've been crunched,
Mhm.
and that's what it always comes down to.
Mhm.
And I think it's, even in talking with, we were talking with some PD, people who were doing trainings, and they were willing to offer, and they had budgeted for time to deliver the training to our teachers. But they had not budgeted for, okay, but let's say now then we get trained in it and we try it, and then it's not working.
Right.
Then how
Yeah,
we
then
work out
what
the
do we
kinks,
do?
we need time to work out the kinks, we need time to
Right,
ask each other how
right,
it's going,
right,
share how
right,
it's going,
right,
work out more
right,
kinks,
right.
maybe bring an expert, get more training. And no one's thinking of any of that.
Right.
And it is some of that transactional nature. It's like, well, if you just deliver the training
Right.
at this
Yeah,
time,
right.
it'll happen, and then you'll be good from then
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
And so it is that shift around looking at things
No, that's
more
good.
around relationships that.
I mean, the
exist.
schools that talk about, the school leaders that say, if I can have my teachers for a day a week, you know, an afternoon a week, as opposed to 18 hours over the course of the year, then, you know, forget it. I can't do anything with 18 hours over the course of the year. Certainly in our work, we had teachers for how much, a week before school, 3 days at the end of school. We had weekly faculty meetings, we had a retreat in the middle. I mean, we had, I think once, I mean, you even figured out the comparison between Charleston and Boston. It was
It's
like,
4 to 6 times more time at the AM.
wow.
4 to 6 times more meeting time.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
And when I did the math, I thought that it was
That's wild.
maybe 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
But then actually
4 to
adding
6.
up the time, it's 4 to 6 times more. And that's just a lot. And then it is those chunks, like we started doing teacher retreats and having departmental retreats, and the teachers love it. They're
Yeah.
really happy. And they always say, we talked about things we never would have gotten to talk about otherwise. But that regular time,
Yeah.
it just, it creates this space for relationships that
Right.
otherwise.
Do you have it, Marco, in your setting?
So we have, currently we have monthly, after school staff meetings, that are 90 minutes, but we do have daily common planning time.
Okay.
And, you know, a lot of our relationship building happens there.
During that
Yeah, I do also think though, I'm really big on this idea of moral courage. And I do think that there is something that's missing in leadership training for school leaders about having moral courage, about being able to say, hey, what are value-based things for your school community that you're willing to fight on, and that you're willing to not let go of. There have certainly been times in my career where there have been pressurable decisions that I've made, not because external folks were happy with it, but because I could sense that, you know, my teachers need a break, or they need time, or this ritual is very important, so we're going to keep it at the center. And it has been scary and challenging to say, no, we're going to do something different than what everybody else does. But for me, again, I think at the core is, you know, how do we protect that human experience? And if I don't wrestle with how do I do that for the adults, then there's no chance that the adults can consistently do that for the kids.
Right.
No, I'm with you. I mean, people used to think we were corny, using that word again at BAA, because every Thanksgiving in this tradition actually came from Vito, because we used to at Fenway spend, after the kids went home for Thanksgiving break, we would spend time, with Vito in his offices talking about how were we doing. And at BAA, what we did was the faculty do a play for the kids.
It was a safety assembly.
Thank you. Safety assembly, where it was a funny play for the kids. But then more important, after the kids went home, we would circle up as adults and say, what were we thankful for? And, I know it took time and people were ready to go and this and the other. But it was such an important ritual to just gather in a circle and say, what am I thankful for?
So one last question. I think we're getting almost time to finish. Flew by, huh?
Yeah.
Marvin Vilma has a question for you. And can you all, and it really touches on what you were just saying. I was wondering if you could extend your thinking. Can you all talk more about how you develop teacher leadership within your institutions?
Great one. All right. Well, we're doing teacher leadership now.
I think before you have to provide opportunities, intentional opportunities for teachers to innovate, for them to go away, to go to nice conferences, get some other ideas outside of the school. And you have to have pathways in your school that create opportunities for teachers to lead. And then you also have to say, it's time, you need to find somewhere else to go where you can grow more.
Yeah.
And that's hard because nobody wants to let go of their good people, if you will.
Yeah.
But I think
We let go of
courage.
Sunny.
Yeah. It takes a lot of moral courage, but it's really important to provide these opportunities for people to grow.
I think doing that also creates, a reputation for you, and it helps with your recruitment efforts.
Yeah.
Early on in my school, I used to get nicked a lot for having teachers come to me and supporting them in their desire to become leaders, and then being launched and go elsewhere. I hear a lot that I have a retention problem. There must be a cultural issue. Why is it that people are coming and they're staying for a couple of years? My assistant principal and I would say, but they're a principal in Brookline. They're this now. They're this now. We're sending out people. And there was a lot of pressure to say, no, you can't do that. You need to get people to come and commit. It doesn't look good. It means there must be instability. Well, the majority of the folks that would be trained and that would be sent out were people of color. And it's created a circumstance for us, in addition to our own recruitment efforts, where there are lots of folks of color who apply for positions at our school because they know that we will support them in their trajectory upwards, and that we're not just trying to recruit them and say, hey, you need to give us the rest of your life. And it's been fascinating because it's changed the tenor of, I think, maturity amongst the staff, because there is this expectation that if you come in, you need to put your fingerprint in, and that folks are here not just in service of getting kids to the good life, but in pursuit of their own good life. And that the best exampleship for kids is that this is not just a thing because you're young, but as an adult, I have passions, I have goals, I have dreams, and I will pursue them. And there'll be another adult, if I leave, that comes and does the same thing. And as a kid, your job's not to be here forever either. Your job is to learn from this space and then go on and do the same thing.
I think if more schools were set up like that, I think we're really proud that when we were at BAA, when we stepped down, there were literally 14 people that could have come in to be the principal. We were thrilled that it was Ann Clark, because that's what we wanted, but we knew that we had really prepared so many others. And I think if leaders aren't taking seriously teacher leadership, and I know at Charleston, you guys really are thinking about that, then we're in trouble.
So, thank you all. I just want to remind people who have joined us that we will have upcoming webinars, one about the Perone-Sizer Institute for Creative Leadership Program next month, and then the month after. The topic we touched on here is how to manage the balance between creativity and test scores. So we're very excited about those. We hope that you join us at the next wave. We hope you apply to the Perone-Sizer Institute. And thank you so much for joining us. We will be in touch when we posted this recording, along with links and more information. And I just want to thank everybody here. That was amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye, friends.
Bye.